Hey everybody, I am Dominick Albano. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am an author with Ascension Press. I wrote this book. It's called The Fundamental Theory of Happiness. It's got a an ice cream cone on the cover because ice cream makes everybody happy. I just figured it's a good thing to put on there. And I'm super excited you guys tuned in tonight. I'm happy to be with you. We're going to be talking a little bit about the book. And let's be honest, like you had a lot that you could tune into tonight. You could be watching Netflix and all the shows on there, like Disney Plus is free, all kinds of stuff you could be tuning into. And for some reason, you have chosen to tune into Ascension Press and this live show and join me for the next however long. So I hope that we can have some fun. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope it entertains you. And I also hope that you get a little something out of it, that it helps lead you a little bit closer to God. I won't lie. I kind of hope this is very different for me, right? I do a ton of parish missions, that sort of speaking. And I've done other video stuff, but doing this live and doing it with people like you feels a little bit like I'm almost doing like something behind the scenes. So while we are going to talk a lot about the book, I also want you to feel like you're getting a real insight into who I really am, and some of the stuff that's not in the book that but it was like filling my head while I was writing it. So to that end, I am going to go over some of the stuff in the book. I want to encourage you to ask questions in the comment stream. Okay, they're going to pass those along to me, and in just a little bit, like we're going to turn it over just to like pure like Q&A. So definitely queue up some of your questions if you've got them. I am in my basement, so I live in the Cincinnati area. For those of you who don't know, Cincinnati is one of those weird cities where uh, the Ohio River runs right through downtown, and you can be like dead center downtown Cincinnati, cross the bridge, and you're in Kentucky. Okay, so the Cincinnati Airport, Cincinnati Ohio Airport, is actually in Kentucky. So I live in Kentucky, a little town called Florence, Kentucky. Um, my town is known, like the number one thing we're known for is the fact that there is a very large water tower next to the highway that says Florence, y'all. Okay, so that's literally what my town is known for. Like our best thing that we're known for is Florence, y'all. Our baseball team is the Y'alls. Okay, so being someone who grew up near Chicago, like I feel a little bit like I live in the South now. I've got four boys. So my son Anthony is 10. Paxton is 6. Paxton's the name you end up with when you let your wife do the naming while she's still on the Demerol. It's just one of those things. Elijah is 4, and Ezra's 2. So 4 boys. I'm in their basement. This space is theirs. Behind me over there is the ping pong table, the Lego tables over there, the Nerf gun walls behind that, the Papa Shots over there. But I've populated this nice little area just for you people, just so that it looks nice over here. We got the Divine Mercy image because we all could use a little bit more mercy. I'm trying to use my head to block this outlet back there because I feel like it didn't look as professional. My kids wanted to put their Lego creations in here, and I've got some of my favorite books over here. A lot of Jesus books. I've got like a whole bunch of Jesus books, and then the Silmarillion by Tolkien because I figured like he should be on any shelf of great books. So there you go. That's a little bit about me. I wrote this book. It's called The Fundamental Theory of Happiness. I wrote it because I think everybody wants to be happy. And, the thing is, while everyone on the planet, no matter what your background, your race, your religion, your creed, where you grew up, what kind of education you've got, like everybody wants to be happy. The worst person on earth wants to be happy. The best person on earth wants to be happy, right? Like there's this uniting thing for us all. And yet everyone on a certain level, I think, struggles with happiness. We ask these big questions, right? What does it mean to be happy? Does God want me to be happy? What will finally make me happy? Why can't I seem to find happiness? So we probably there's probably like 20 different ways that we could reformulate that question. But the fact is, like, it's there, right? Like that some version of that question exists in every person's heart. And I really was struck a few years ago with the fact that like sometimes I do things because I think they're going to make me happy and they don't. And that really is frustrating, right? Like that's frustrating. Let's just be honest about that. Second, like there's certain things that I know will make me happy and yet I struggle to do them, right? So I've known for years that like exercise, right? Like exercise is something that makes me happy, right? Like it makes me feel better. It makes me feel good on a daily basis. Like if I get up and I exercise, I feel more accomplished. And yet I have never gotten to a point where it's like, oh, this is easy to do. Like it's still hard every single time. So yeah, I choose to do things that I think are going to make me happy, but they don't, and that's frustrating. I struggle to do things that I know will make me happy, and that's super frustrating. And then most absurdly, like I do things that I know absolutely will not make me happy. Right? Like we all have this, right? We all sin, right? There are things that I know will not make me happy in the end, and yet I do them anyway. So happiness is like a struggle. The other side of the book that I don't normally talk about this, and a lot of people don't normally get to hear it, but I really wrote this book. I'm very different from like a lot of Catholic speakers and writers, I think, in that like I didn't come from like the uber Catholic family. I didn't go to Steubenville. I am a lot of my friends and a lot of my family, like I'm the religious kid, I'm the religious family member. And I don't think a lot of people understood like why I've made the faith choices that I've had in my life. And I got this idea that was like, all right, if I could sit down, if I could grab coffee with a cousin or with a sibling or whatever, and they could say, all right, why? Like why? You've got this faith thing. It's obviously very important to you and your family. Why? And why is that? If they wanted to have that conversation, they wanted to grab coffee and would give me a couple hours, and we could really intentionally have that conversation. Start thinking about like what would I say to them, right? Like how would I explain it to them? And in the end, I decided like to settle on something that I thought they could easily and quickly relate to, which is happiness, right? And this idea that even if you could prove to me that God doesn't exist, I think that the way of life that Christianity proposes, the way of life that God calls us to, ultimately leads us to the greatest happiness. And I figured if I could help them understand that, maybe that gets us like one small step closer to God. So um, that's kind of like the why behind the book. I started writing the book about 5 years ago. My grandfather died, and the thing to know there. So my name's Dominick Lewis Albano. I come from a very Italian family, and one of our very Italian family traditions is that the firstborn son is always named after the grandfather. Okay, so my firstborn son is Anthony Lewis Albano. I'm Dominick Lewis Albano. My dad is Anthony Lewis Albano. His dad was Dominick Lewis Albano, my grandfather. His dad was Anthony Lewis Albano. It just kind of goes back in line that way, right? Like that's the way it works. And so about 5 years ago now, I was at my grandfather's funeral. Grandfather led a great life. He, World War II vet. Married my grandmother on their fourth date. They were married for 62 years, 64 years, something crazy like that. He built his house, like the house that they lived in for almost his entire life, with his bare hands. And that's not like the way we talk about buying, like building houses now is like we hired someone to do it. Like, no, he literally went on weekends and like hammered nails into wood and like built the house he lived in. Five kids. I have too many cousins to count. Tons of great grandchildren. Like I think he was 86 when he died, 85. So point is, very long and happy life, right? And there's something crazy about when you look at a program at the funeral and you're like, and it's like the celebration of the life, and then it's your name, right? Because my name was his name, like Dominick Lewis Albano, Dominick Lewis Albano, named after my grandfather. So when I'm looking at this program, yeah, it's like a celebration of life, and it's my name, right? And so that, of course, like that naturally makes you think, right? Like it just gets some big questions going on in your head. And so I started thinking about this idea of like, what does it really mean to live a great life? What does it really mean, or what does it really mean to be happy, right? And I started asking people that day, and I remember I asked my younger brother. He was probably 23, 24 at the time. He's a couple years younger than me. And I said, Michael, I said, what's it mean to live a great life? And he said, to be able to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it. And, fair enough. But I thought that sounds like an answer of like someone who's in their early 20s. So I wanted to know, I was looking for some age and some wisdom. And so I went to my older sister Kelly, one of my best friends, love her to death. And she's 2 years older than me. So, someone I can look up to, a little bit more age, a little bit more wisdom. I say, Kelly, what does it mean to live a great life? What's it really mean to be happy? And she said, Dominick, shut up. Stop being weird. That's what she told me. Dominick, shut up, right? Like a good big sister. She kind of, didn't have much of an answer for me there, but I did not shut up. I actually kept asking people throughout the day. And I got some good answers, right? But I learned two things from that experience. One, nobody failed to understand the question, right? Like everyone got exactly, like I didn't have to have any complicated explanations. I didn't have to like clarify the question. I didn't have to put any caveats or like points on it. That's the cat. That was the cat. Just we are live, people. There might be a cat jumping up in the background here. It could happen, right? Um, I didn't have to explain the question all. Like when I said, "What does it mean to live a great life?" They got it. They're like, "Oh yeah, I want to live a great life." Like everybody wants to live a great life. When I said, "What does it mean to be happy?" They were like, "Oh yeah, I get that." Right? Like I didn't have to explain the concept to them. They clearly understood it. And the other thing that I learned, so that was the point number one. Everyone wants to live a great life. Point number two, nobody, it was clear. I mean, I probably asked 20 different people. While some people gave like decent answers, it was clear to me that the question caught every single person off guard. Every single person I talked to, it caught them off guard. There was not a single person who gave me an answer where they said, you know what? I've thought a lot about this question and I've tried a lot of different answers and I've rolled this around in my head and I've thought about it from a lot of different angles and I've tested my answers against real life experience, right? And here's what I've come to. Like nobody gave me an answer like that, right? Some people gave me some very good answers, but it was always off the top of their head. And I thought like, man, if everybody wants to be happy, right? Like if everyone wants to live a great life and we've all got these questions rolling around in our heads, like, doesn't it make sense for us to stop and think about this, right? Like, and think about these answers and dive into these questions and really like come up with what does that really mean? And that's like where this book really started, was really diving into this question of what does it mean to be, happy and whatever variation of that question you want to get into. So I basically looked at a few things. I looked at, I looked at scripture, saints, encyclicals, just some of the great, in the history of the church, we have a treasure trove of knowledge, right? And I've always been one since I was like 16. I realized like there's 2,000 years worth of church history, and 99.9% of the people who've like been a part of the church, and they're all smarter than me and wiser than me and holier than me. So always lean on their example and look to their word. So I started there. I started doing like personal interviews. So you ever have people in your life who um, they just seem to live life on like a different level than everyone else? Like it seems like they just get something that nobody else gets, or somebody you look at and you're like, I don't know what they've got, but I know that I want it, right? We all have those people. There's not a ton of people like that, but I probably have, four, five, six people in my own life that I would identify that way. And then I also ask like friends, like who do they know that they would identify like that? And I began calling these people the fundamentally happy. Okay, I kind of coined that phrase from like these people are fundamentally happy. What is it? What makes them tick? What do they got that I don't got that nobody else has? Right? Like what is it? So interviewing those people, and then really the last thing is two things. One, my own like personal life experience, and just taking the things that I was experiencing to prayer and talking to God about them. And then the last is, so my wife, she's upstairs somewhere, and you should know about her that she has her PhD in neuroscience. Okay, so she's a lot smarter than me. I married up big time, and super lucky to have her. And I went to her and I was like, I want to know what science says about happiness, right? And I don't want like, if you Google about this stuff, you just like Google about it, you're gonna find everyone's just got their ideas, right? Like everyone's got ideas around it. Um, but I told her, I was like, I don't want like Uncle Bob's House of Learning's conclusions about happiness, right? Like, what does evidence-based research show from reputable institutions. So what is Harvard and MIT and Stanford and Oxford, like what are their, human studies, sciences, what are they showing about, what's neuroscience have to teach us about happiness? So she also contributed to the book. She did a ton of great research, and we put some of that in there too. So what I really came away with was basically a 5-step theory of happiness. And I've got them up here. You can't even really see that, but I can. So that's the table of contents. So a 5-step theory of happiness. And I want to tell you, the word theory can be understood in one of two ways. Okay. The first way we can understand theory is like a scientific theory, right? Like a squared plus b squared equals c. Oh, I just got in. Yeah. Nope. It seemed to be going fine. I didn't touch anything, and it just went away. So yeah, we'll jump right back in. I know where I was, and I can backtrack a little bit. And we're back. I hope you guys took that technical difficulty, little glitch there, as a chance to go get yourself a drink. Right? There's other advantages to us not, this being live with you being on your couch. I'm in Kentucky. Go pour yourself a whiskey or something. But getting back to where we were, uh, theory, right? I was talking about theory and the idea that there's two ways to understand theory. The first is a scientific theory, a squared plus b squared equals happiness. That's not the kind of theory we're talking about, okay? There is a second way for us to understand the idea of theory, okay? And that second way is more like art theory or music theory, right? The idea that there's something beautiful or good or true, and we can achieve a certain level of understanding about that, right? We can look at a beautiful work of art, and we can talk about the color composition, and we can talk about the lighting that was used. We can talk about the layout. We can talk about the media, and themes and hidden messages and all this stuff, right? Symbolism and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, it's just a beautiful painting, right? There is some unknowable quantity to that. The idea when we talk about like that kind of theory, it's really like a set of rules or guidelines or principles that help you in practicing an art. So there's rules and guidelines to painting that can help you make a beautiful painting. There's rules and guidelines and principles of music that can help you write a beautiful song. And so in this same way, there's rules or guidelines or principles that can help you find the happiness that God has created you for. And that's what this fundamental theory of happiness, that's the kind of happiness we're talking about. And the book goes over what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes or so. It's a real brief overview of each of the 5 Principles are the five fundamental, principles of happiness. I don't like to use the word rules. I think people in general, I don't know. I'm a big rule breaker. That's like who I am. So I just have a natural, um, aversion to that. So I like to use the word principles, right? We got five principles or guidelines. The book dives into each of these super in depth. I'm going to like gloss over them and spend just a couple minutes on each. But I encourage you, ask your questions in the comments. I don't think they've sent me any questions yet, which is fine. Like I'm not going to be talking to them for about another 10 minutes, but really, like as you have a question, submit it into the comments below. So the first guideline or the first principle is to become dissatisfied. Basically, what are you going to be? What kind of happiness is going to satiate you? Right? We're all on this search for happiness. And really on a certain level, happiness isn't very difficult. If you want to be happy for a couple minutes, like go eat a Hershey bar. That's going to make you happy for a couple minutes. It's going to be fine. You want to be happy for like a half an hour, go like take a nap for a half an hour, right? Like who doesn't love naps? And we all got time, right? I never used to take naps. Now I'm like, let's go take a nap. Um, you know, uh, you want to be happy for a couple hours, like watch a movie, or have a really great meal with family or friends, right? Like there's certain things that you can do. I told you earlier, like I'll go for a run, right? And that makes me happy for, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, right? Like I get this lasting effect. So on a certain level, happiness isn't actually that difficult to figure out. The question really becomes is like, how happy do you want to be? I'm a huge baseball fan. This concept, like a big thing that influenced this concept was when the Cubs, so I'm a big Cubs fan. I grew up near Chicago. When the Cubs won the World Series, right, in 2016, I was really happy, right? And I was really happy for a long time after that. And I remember thinking, like, this must feel better than it does for like a Yankees fan because we've waited, it's never happened before in my entire life, right? Like, waited 108 years. But over time, right, like like now I don't feel and happiness in the same way that I did because of that. So as I did at that time. And so the question really becomes like, what is going to satisfy your search for happiness, right? If you're going to be just satisfied, if you're going to decide, I'm going to be satisfied with an hour's worth of happiness, go ahead. You just go eat a Hershey bar. You're going to be fine. Take a nap. You don't need this anymore, right? Like, go ahead. Your search for happiness is done, okay? But you're constantly going to be finding yourself needing to fuel that and to feed that. If you want to pin your happiness on a baseball team winning the World Series, yeah, that might last a while longer when it happens, but you also might wait 108 years to be happy. And I don't think anybody wants to wait around for another 108 years for them to be happy. So that's what that first principle is become dissatisfied. You have to become dissatisfied with all the mediocrity that the world tries to sell you in place of true happiness. The world is constantly lying to us about what's going to make us happy. Those lies take shape in our hearts and in our minds in a lot of different ways. The devil is really good at customizing those lies for each and every one of us. You're going to be happy when you finally get that relationship you've been searching for. You're going to be happy when you finally get that job, or you're going to be happy, when you finally, make this much money, or you have this car, or you lose this much weight, or you look like this, or whatever, right? Like the world lies to us that way. You're going to be satisfied with that, or you're going to become dissatisfied. Okay. So first principle is to become dissatisfied. The second principle is to deepen your perception. And this is one where I especially encourage you. There's 5 levels of perception, and I can't go through all of them. But basically, this principle is all about seeing the world as God sees it, right? We often we have such limited vision, and we can only see what's happening right in front of us, and we can't see God's plan. We can't know what's coming next, right? We can't see the future. We don't know what God's doing. And we only can see what's kind of directly in front of us or what's behind us, right? So that's why we got phrases like hindsight's 2020. That's why we say things like trust, because we can't see where things are going, and we can't even really see things as they really are. The example I always use is like if you're driving on the highway, some jerk cuts you off, and zooms into your lane and gets off on the exit, and you're like, what the heck? And you're mad, and you're angry, and you're cursing at him, you're flipping him the bird. And you get home and you're cranky with your kids, and you're ticked off. You got a short temper, and it can ruin your whole night, right? But if you knew, right? How we perceive, our level of perception changes how we experience these kind of situations, right? So if you knew that that guy was driving his pregnant wife to the hospital and she was in labor and she was only 31 weeks pregnant and the baby was going to be born premature and he was trying to get her there as fast as he could, it changes your whole, like the whole way that you experience the situation, right? Like now you're not mad, you're not ticked off, you're praying for the guy and you're saying a quick prayer for him and you're hoping he gets where he's going safely. And, it changes everything about how you've reacted to it changes because you've perceived it differently. Now, of course, the catch comes in that we can't know that, right? Like somebody cuts you off on the highway, you can't know that. And so what's left to us is really one of a couple different options. And here I like to really talk about this ancient Christian practice. It's really fallen out of vogue. We don't talk about it much anymore, but I think it's really important, and I think we should bring it back, and it should become the new hip, cool thing that we should talk about. It used to be considered our Christian duty to assume good intentions of the people around us, right? So it used to be our Christian duty, right? We used to teach that it was your duty that when the guy cuts you off on the highway, you assume he's got a good reason to do that. You assume he's got good intentions. Why? Not for his benefit, but for your own benefit, right? We don't talk about that much anymore. Now we live in a world that if something goes wrong or somebody does something, we assume that they are just the worst. But maybe, maybe we can get back into that, and maybe doing that will help us see the world around us as God sees it. So, first principle is to become dissatisfied. Second principle is to deepen your perception. The third principle is called face your enemies, and we really deal with the enemies of happiness. And we begin to dissect those down and talk about what actually holds us back from feeling the happiness that we think we should feel and the happiness that we've been created for. And we talk about the different ways, the different strategies the devil employs to make us miserable. And so we talk about each of those in detail, and then how to overcome them. The fourth, so we got become dissatisfied, deepen your perception, know your enemy. The fourth principle is called the permanent principle. This one's super big, but really, really great. It came to me from one of the Fundamentally Happy, and it basically says this. That something has to do with our purpose, right? And our purpose really leads us to happiness because God created us on purpose. He created us with a purpose. We are happiest when we are following the path that God has created for us for our happiness. And so knowing our purpose and knowing what God made us for and what we're made to do is hugely important. And so the permanent principle says that something has to do with our purpose in direct proportion to how permanent it is. Okay. Let me say that again. Something has to do with our purpose in direct proportion to how permanent it is. So, maybe you put your purpose and your identity in like your work. Well, what happens when we all get furloughed and laid off and the economy goes crazy and there's pandemics and nobody can go into work? Well, like if you've wrapped your whole purpose and identity up in your work, you can see how fleeting that is, right? Like if you wrap your whole purpose, your whole identity up in money, like we've seen what's happened to the stock markets. If you wrap, honestly, you can do this in relationships too, right? Like if you wrap your whole purpose and identity up in a girlfriend or boyfriend and then they leave you, right? Where are you left? So that's where this idea of, what are the permanent things in life? For me, like my wife that's a pretty permanent relationship, right? Like even if I die, she'll still say, "Oh, my husband Dominick," right? Or my late husband Dominick, right? Like I won't ever not have been her husband, even more permanent in a certain sense is my relationship with my kids, right? Like 50 years after I'm dead, my kids will still call me dad, that relationship will exist. And of course, what's the most permanent thing is our relationship with God. So, step 4 or the fourth principle is the permanent principle. And then step 5 is living on purpose. So it takes, after we've dived into purpose, dove, whichever. After we dive into purpose, we talk about, okay, how do we live this? Because loving sounds easy on paper, but it's actually really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult to love people. Sometimes it's not, but a lot of times it is, right? you are a parent and your child is coming home for Thanksgiving and they're going to stay at your house for a couple days and they're an adult. And guess what? They're bringing with their new girlfriend. And you know that your kid's coming to the house and they're going to expect to like share a bedroom in your room, but they're not married. And and you're like, okay, well, what do I do here? Do I tell them, no, you can't stay at my house? Or do I say, you can stay at my house, but you're my house, my rules? Does that leave us estranged? Does that break down some sort of a relationship? Do I let them live as they want to live, but make sure that they understand like that I don't think it's right and that I think God's calling them to something more, right? What do I do there, right? Like, and that's one example. It's honestly, it's a very common example. Literally every single one of you watching, and I don't know, there's maybe 1,000 people watching. Every single one of you has either dealt with that scenario or has a best friend who has dealt with that scenario, right? I deal with that scenario on a daily basis. So it's like what is the best way for a parent to love their adult child through that? That's a real thing. And so diving into that fifth principle, is living on purpose. Living out that purpose that God's created us for. That's kind of what we're diving into there. So we're going to get to our questions in just a couple minutes. We're back, maybe, I guess. Okay. Sorry, no idea why it's dropping us. I hope it's coming through loud and clear in between the drops, and then it just says, "Hey, you know what? You're done." And I'm like, "No, we are not done. We got people to talk to." I'm going to start getting to these questions now. Keep them coming. I do want to say you can visit ascensionpress.com/happiness, ascensionpress.com/happiness. And you can get your copy. I think they have it on sale right now. I don't know if I was supposed to say that. I mean, they probably don't want me to not say that, right? But I do think it's on sale unless they like lifted the sale. But you can do that. You also can go to so you can get it from Ascension Press for super cheap, or you can visit my website, DominickAlbano.com. And if you go through there, you can buy like an autographed copy. So some people like that. I can write you a little note, or if you want to give it as a gift to somebody. Okay, so let's get to some of these questions. I'm super excited about them. Keep them coming. First I got to say, Elaine. Elaine says, "Where in Chicago are you from? Go Cubs." I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, so it's about 90 miles west. I mean, Elaine's going to know where it is, but for the rest of you, it's 90 miles west of Chicago. So yeah, huge Cubs fan. Everyone in my family. But yeah, I grew up in Rockford, born and raised. Was supposed to just be there this week for Easter, but now I'm not. So. Donna asks, I lost my husband 2 years ago today. Guess I'm just wondering what happiness is moving forward. I'm doing good, just not sure how happy I am. So first and foremost, Donna, thanks for asking the question. So sorry for your loss, right? Like um, that's something that nobody can be prepared for. And, you certainly would never wish on anyone. And my heart goes out to you. One of the things I really so let me say something, and I'm going to use this question to segue into another one about joy and a question about joy and happiness. In general, I can get really, what's the right way to put this? I can get really annoyed with empty ideas. Okay, really annoyed with empty ideas. The way I usually phrase it is I don't like philosophy. Okay, and the reason why is I want things to be practical. I don't want, you know, I don't want like ethereal things, or like things that are Okay, that's fine. Like that's an answer, but it doesn't actually help me in my daily basis, right? Like I want stuff that is concrete and practical and impactful to my daily life. And I really like in writing the book, like there's a lot of that in there. I actually do talk about that in the book. So, there's this element with a question around like, uh, what happiness moving forward from the death of a spouse? Like no answer I'm going to give you is going to like almost any answer I do give you is like almost like lip service, right? Or it is philosophical, right? Because like that's terrible, right? Like that is terrible. There's no way around it. Like here's my answer to that question. Some things in life, there's like no safe port in the storm. There is no way around it. There's only a way through it, And it sounds like you're doing good, which is awesome. But happiness is going to look very different depending on where you are in life. And so this is my real answer to the question. State in life changes the way we look at happiness and what we mean when we say we want to be happy. So, happiness for a 14-year-old girl in high school, he's starting off high school, looks very different from like a college boy, looks very different from like a seminarian, looks very different from a 35-year-old with 4 young kids at home, looks very different from my mom, who just wishes me and her grandkids were there for Easter. Looks very different for my aunt. My aunt is a widow as well. Donna. And yeah, I mean there's like I know for her that's still like a major struggle, right? Major struggle. And there's certain times myself, when I think about my uncle that we lost, like there's sadness involved in that. So I think what we have to do in each of these stages of life, first, it always goes back to what's our purpose. And God, what you kind of got to live each of these principles, right? So, God, what is our purpose? What are you trying to do in this? Help me see this as you see it. How is this situation being used to keep me from happiness and keep me from God? So that's kind of a very long way of saying, we got to figure out what happiness looks like in that stage and know that there's not one prescription for how what happiness like looks like for every state of life. And it leads into another question we have here is from Nancy, who asks, could you explain the difference between joy and happiness? And I love that you asked this question, Nancy. I bet there's a lot of discussion on that in the comments because, yeah, like that's a huge question that a lot of people ask. If you do any sort of like research around this, and I've done a lot of research around it, it is a huge question that people ask. So here's where I think a lot of people, are what they're really asking is like, what do I really want when I say I want to be happy? Okay. And what you'll find in a lot of the pop psychology, or you'll find in a lot of just people who are like writing blog posts with their opinions about it, is they'll say, well, happiness is a feeling and joy is a state of being, or it's a state of, they get this like philosophical, ethereal, it is a higher plane, this joy that, that infuses all things, and that I can feel miserable and still be joyful. And I'm dissatisfied with this answer. Why? Because like I want joy and happiness, right? And I think most people, right, like we want joy and happiness, right? Like we want to feel happy and to be happy, and that's all. What most people, when they answer this question. So again, if you were to Google it, what you're basically going to find is they're using joy and happiness to just say that there's a difference between feeling and being. Okay, there's a difference between feeling and being. Okay. All right. So why can't we just say that? Like, let's just acknowledge that and say there's a difference between feeling and being. And the truth is, all of us, we want to feel happy and be happy, right? Like we want both. We want to feel happy and we want to be happy, right? Like that's the reality. So it's not going to be satisfactory to be one or the other. Okay. In general, the greatest good is to be with God, right? Like that's like the ultimate happiness. And so can we suffer and be in physical pain and be happy because we are with God or doing what God is calling us to do? Like absolutely, right? Like absolutely. And so I'd say well, what you're really asking here is what's the difference between joy and happiness? What you're really saying is, well, is there a difference between feeling happy and being happy? The answer is obviously there is. Um, Being happy has to do with us living out of our purpose and our identity, and that's really what the book is all about: is getting to this place where are you doing what God wants you to do, and are you as the person that God created you to be, right? Like that's what being happy is all about. You can use the word joy if you want, okay? I just say be, okay? Because being implies purpose. So like being happy or being joyful has to do with that happens when you do what God created you to do and you live as the person he created you to be. And that's really what like the fundamental theory of happiness, that's what it leads you to. It's a practical process for that. Feeling happy is the easier part, but the truth is we want both. So nobody really wants one or the other. We all want both, which is fine, which is not bad. There is a place for suffering, but that's my answer to that question. So yeah, difference between joy and happiness. Really, what you're saying is there a difference between being happy and feeling happy? Yes, there is. We want both anyways, so let's not get caught up on the distinction and know that the greater good is being happy. That happens when you know your purpose and you know who you are. You know what God created you to do, and you know who He created you to be. And really, the question then becomes, how do I get there? And for that, I have to say, read the book. Michael says, sounds like your book would make a great book for my men's group study. Like I would love that. That'd be awesome. I've often told people you can email me, and I do have like a study I've created because I've gotten a lot of people ask about that. So on my website, DominickAlbano.com, my email address is on there, like my personal email address. Like I'm not hiding from anybody. So my email address is on there. If you email me, I actually do have a like series of questions and kind of broke it down into a study format. But I do have like when I preach this as like a parish mission, you wouldn't believe how many men come up to me and they're like, it'll be a 70-year-old man and he's like, you described the first 50 years of my life. Like that's what your talk was about, was the first 50 years of my life. So I think I think that'd be great. Catherine says, any tips for happiness in the current COVID-19 climate? Yeah, tough question to answer, right? Kathy, was that your name? Catherine, sorry, Catherine. Um, tough question to ask because, or tough question to answer because it's going to be very different for each person, right? I'm very blessed in that like I can work from home. My wife still has to go into work, but it's like fairly safe, and she goes in for like a couple hours a week, rather than like full time. My kids are all home. None of us have gotten sick. No one that I know super well, no one in my immediate family has gotten sick, right? So like, let's just acknowledge that. For me, I'm like, this is awesome, right? Like I get to stay home all day, every day with my 5 favorite people on the planet. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't enjoy that. Do I wish there wasn't like death and suffering and disease and pandemic? 100% absolutely. And we pray nightly for it to end. But at the same time, like there's a lot of blessings that have come from me. I have other friends who are like furloughed, right? Like who have, wife was a stay-at-home mom, they have a job and they've been furloughed or they're out of work. And so like their experience of this is going to be 100% different. So I am going to assume that someone who asks this question about finding happiness during this COVID-19 situation, here's what I'm going to assume. I assume that you're not in a great place. Okay, like I think that's a safe assumption to make, and I think it's a fair assumption to make that if you ask that question, something's wrong. Okay, last year, no, a year and a half ago, I unexpectedly lost my job. Right, like out of nowhere. This isn't something I've ever like talked about, but like after 2 years, almost 3 years worth of exemplary performance reviews, of the top level of raises that the place I was working for offered. I mean, literally 2 days after leaving my like boss's office, being praised for like how great work I was doing. Came in on a Thursday morning at 8 a.m. and left at 10 a.m. without a job. Okay, wife was a stay-at-home mom at the time; she wasn't working. She had finished up her PhD and wanted to stay home with the kids because if you've ever Like if any of you, have your PhD or someone who's gotten it, it's a ton of work. And we had 3 kids while she was getting her PhD. So she wanted to stay home with the kids. So I was the only one working at the time. And I drove home on a Friday morning in October, knowing we were going into Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I, as the sole provider for my young family, had no more money coming in. It was terrifying. Like, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And like, coupled up in that, where all of this stuff around, like, why am I not good enough? And how could this happen to me? And why don't they value me? And why don't they want me? And what's wrong with me? And then, of course, what all comes within that is like, God, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Where are you at in this? And I was unemployed for like 7 months. Okay, 7 months, long time. Certainly people have been like unemployed longer, but it was not, it was not quick, right? Like, it wasn't like a month later that everything turned around. It wasn't like 2 weeks later and I'd landed a job. I mean, it was 7 months. So there was basically 7 months where every day was filled with like fear and panic. And what I tried to do, so now let me get to the answer, right? We can't paint. One of the things that we talk about under becoming dissatisfied, one of the ideas we talk about there is like being the man in the mask. Okay, the man in the mask is the person who pretends. Okay, social media is all about pretending. It's super. Like, you have no idea how often I was laid off and I was terrified. I was so upset. I wasn't eating. My chest hurt. But like, if you talk to me, I pretend like everything's great. We're gonna be fine. Trust in the Lord. Jesus has got this. Like, okay, you have to be real. Again, be real with God. Okay, we just left like Good Friday, and Jesus wasn't like, Good Friday, agony in the garden. Like, I guess it's really Thursday night, right? Like, that's Holy Thursday evening after the Last Supper. Like, Jesus isn't sitting there like, it's all good, I got this. Like, trust in the Lord. He's begging God not to have him go through this, right? So, like, just be honest with that. Like, if you're in a struggling place right now, like, God can handle our suffering. And I don't mean that in a way that he takes our suffering away. Like, God can handle your begging for it to stop, right? Like, he can be there for that. He was there for that for Jesus. He's going to be there for that for you. And then you're not going to feel this. I really don't. I mean, it's a great blessing if you can, but you have to, like, sometimes you can know things here, and sometimes you can feel things here. Right? It's not on the camera, but I'm pointing to my heart. Sometimes you can know things, and sometimes you want to feel things, and ideally we want both. But sometimes you can only get one or the other. You're going to feel sad or scared, and you have to know God's got this, and I can trust in the Lord. Okay, and that's that's my long answer to that. Feel one way, think another way. That's not faking it till you make it. That's just embracing the reality that you're in, and from there, pray, 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 pray. Don't forget to pray. Pray, 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 pray. Don't forget to pray. And I am living proof that you can get through it, right? Any tips? How do you get back on track to be happy when you fall into unhappiness? Great question. Maybe a good time to bring up that, like, we can't. I think this is so important. Like, mental health is real. Mental health is real. Okay, depression is real. And as Catholics, we have to be like, you can't pray your way out of depression. You can't pray your way out of mental health situations. And so we have to, like, acknowledge that, and you have to acknowledge that really seriously. Like, when I was laid off, there was times where I was like, hey, Beck, like, I had to have deep conversations with my wife about, am I upset or am I falling into poor mental health, right? Like, I knew that in my situation, I was going to have lots of fear and anxiety and worry. Okay. That was going to come with the territory, but there's a threshold you cross from like there to like more serious issues of mental health and depression and that sort of thing. And so I do want to say that is, if you're, unsure about that, like, always, like, step one, seek help. A spiritual director does not replace a mental health therapist. If you need someone great, Dr. Bataro from the Catholic Psych Institute, he is a Catholic clinical psychologist and runs a whole practice, and they do online therapy. I do a ton of work with him. I couldn't recommend him highly enough. So Dr. Greg Bataro is someone you can look up. But that's just like a good caveat that I want to say. So when you fall into unhappiness, um, so again, I think we can feel unhappy and be happy at the same time if doing what God has called us to do. So that's like the first answer is first question you ask yourself, am I doing what God has called me to do? And again, there's a lot into the book that go, like the question then becomes like, well, how do I know if I'm doing what God wants me to do? The like step-by-step process for that is like in here. But in general, I'd say, are you loving yourself? You know, God created you and he said, like, love your neighbor as yourself. You can only love other people as much to the degree that you're loving yourself. So physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, right? Physically, emotionally, intellectually, are you eating right? Are you exercising? Are you reading good books intellectually, right? Are you reading good books, challenging yourself? Emotionally, are you trying to stay close to the people that are important to you? Are you calling your grandma? Are you calling your mom? You know, man, I used to use that example all the time, but my grandma passed away like 6 months ago, so I can't call her anymore, right? But like, are you maintaining strong relationships and strong emotional health? Um, so yourself, others, right? Like, are you giving your time, energy, and attention to the relationships that matter most? And you can use the permanent principle to figure that out. And then your relationship with God, right? Are you loving God? You know, like we don't need to overcomplicate that. Like, read your Bible every day, pray every day. You know, those are two great places to start. So that's where I'd always say, like, if you fall into unhappiness, make sure first that you are being happy. Be okay with feeling unhappy, as long as you are being happy, so you're living your identity and purpose. And if you want to feel happy, a quick hack for feeling happy, so I call this like the number one happiness hack that I know, is to make someone else feel happy, right? Like, it just tends to be like the law of the harvest applies. We got that reading during Lent. The measure with which you measure will be returned to you. An overflowing stack tampered down, right? Like, God's going to give you back what you give out to other people. So when you drive through the Starbucks line, pay for the person behind you. You know, use your, you know, we all are like on Amazon because no one knows what to do, and we're all like therapy shopping to make ourselves feel better. Like, find a book that you love and just send it to a friend. Be like, hey, you know, I love this book. That sounds like I'm plugging my own book. I really wasn't. I was thinking like you know, a fiction book, something entertaining. Or so like pick a movie. I'll say movie, right? Like, go on Amazon, find a movie that you love, and send it to a friend. You know, buy someone an album on iTunes. You can do that. Like, whatever. Like, do something like that. It's gonna make you feel. I mean, like, if you just need that quick hack to feel happy, that's going to do it. Um, let's see. We've got Kathy. Asks, my purpose was wrapped up around being a mom, but I've been an empty nester for 4 years now, and I haven't been able to find my new purpose. My husband needs are different, and I can be there for him, but that doesn't seem to be enough. Any suggestions on finding happiness as an empty nester? So again, I think there's being happy and feeling happy. And I'll use an example. So again, being happy and feeling happy, and then also state in life, right? So your state in life has changed, so the way you perceive happiness has changed, and typically it's not the being happy, it's the feeling happy we're getting caught up on there. So let me give you an example that I hope, you know, like a friend, you know, has just shared with me the story of a gentleman who a few months ago he lost his wife, also an empty nester. You know, man in his 60s, lost his wife, super hard situation, obviously terrible. And, you know, he kind of threw himself back into work and threw himself into church, right? So go to daily mass, go to the rosary afterwards, go into work early, stay late, work really hard, go back to church afterwards, work on the grounds, like not be home alone, and just stay super busy, right? And then what happens Pandemic, right? Pandemic happens and he can't go to mass and he can't go to work, and he just has to stay home and like be in it. And I think what he really, when I heard that story, I think it's a great example of like he was probably doing what God's calling him to do, taking care of himself, going to the gym, working out, working hard at work, praying a lot. So he was being happy, but he certainly wasn't feeling happy. And he was keeping busy to not have to deal with that. And I'm not saying he feels happy now, but in a certain sense, like, he had to like dive into and he had to really confront like his own grief and his own situation. And so, um, that's a long way of saying or using that as an example to say, uh, it's never going to be fixed, right? Like, probably not. I mean, for him, it's probably never going to be fixed. Like, these things, we can't fix these situations, but we can move through them. And I don't mean get over them. I really do mean we can move through them with God, and in the right situation, we can kind of go through those storms. So, let's see, that was Kathy. That would be my suggestion on finding happiness as an empty nester. Make sure that you are being happy, and then change your routines. Obviously your routine has like super changed in the last month. But what made you happy before is not going to be the same things that make you happy now. So find what makes you happy. Try new things that make you happy now. Feel happy because step one, being happy. Christopher says, "Thank you, Dominic. I asked my two teenage boys to watch you. That's great. Happy to hear that, Christopher. Um, I hope that they enjoy it. If nothing else, there's Lego guys back here for them to look at. I think this is an angry Luke Skywalker Lego. So, if nothing else, we've got that and other Legos back there. Uh, let's see. We got time for maybe one or two more. Rick asks, okay, let's make this the last question then. Rick asks, do you have a personal experience of tough times that you got through that motivated you to write this book, or is it because of wanting to bring people to Christ? Both are great, by the way. Um, yeah, so I do talk. So two answers. One, I mean, it really was motivated by wanting to bring people closer to Christ, and I told that story at the beginning of this would be my answer if someone said, why do you believe in God, why are you doing this stuff? This would be like how I'd answer that question. I think there's 1,000 good ways to answer that. This just would be how I'd answer it. But also I definitely had this experience when I was, I don't know, maybe 28, 29, where I realized I'd gotten to a point in life where we're very conditioned, especially in American culture. We're conditioned as kids to always be like looking for the next thing, right? So it's like by the time you're like 13, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? All right, then where are you going to high school? Where are you going to college? What are you going to major in? Where are you going to get a job? What are you going to do for work? Who are you going to marry? Where are you going to live? Are you going to buy a house? You going to have kids? How many kids are you going to have? Well, when are you going to get this promotion? How much money are you going to make? What kind of car are you going to drive? It's always like this compounding cycle, right? And I was probably 28 or 29, and like I'm married, and I'm like, life was great, right? Like I had everything the world told me I was supposed to have. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous wife who's getting her PhD in neuroscience. We had two, I think, boys at the time. Our two sons. I had a couple cars, a comfortable house. I had a great job at the time. I had founded my own ministry in Milwaukee. I used to live in Milwaukee. Founded this ministry called Arise Missions, and things were going awesome. And I was the executive director, and I was doing it with like my best friends from growing up. So life was great there. And I remember talking to my friend Pete Birds. Shout out to Pete Birds. I was driving home with him from this work we were doing at this parish, and we just got to talking. I was like, "Is this all there is, right? Like, am I just supposed to try to like make more money and buy a bigger house and have a nicer car and take nicer vacations and have more kids? I guess like there's only so much runway to that, but like." I really felt like my life had turned into the pursuit of more, and none of what I had was bad, right? I'm not saying that like having is bad, but I realized like my whole life had been lived for the next thing, and I was like running out of runway, you know. So it's maybe you call that like a corner office experience. I talked to a priest once, so that's what he described that as. He was He worked in New York City downtown and had gotten to the top floor in the corner office. There was nowhere else for him to go, and then left his job and ended up like becoming a priest later in life because I guess I kind of had an experience like that. And I was not happy because ultimately, even though I was doing good things, I really didn't know. I didn't have a great grasp on who I was and what God had in store for my life. So yeah, that was kind of my two motivations. I think that's about it. I think it's a good place to wrap up. Um, so thank you all so much for tonight. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry for the couple times we dropped. Again, my name is Dominick Albano. Go to ascensionpress.com/happiness to get the book, or you can visit my website, dominicalbano.com. If you do dominicalbano.com/, Lent 2020. There's like some special products there, including the autographed copy of the Fundamental Theory of Happiness you can buy. And you can reach out to me if you have any other questions. I love people. I'm on Facebook too, so just feel free to reach out, keep in touch. Thank you so much to Ascension. Keep in mind they're doing this kind of stuff every day. It's awesome that they're doing it. I think they do the rosary every day at 4, and then someone's coming on like this every night, 4 and 8 Eastern time, so adjust to your time zone. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys sticking with me and asking your questions. Thank you all so much. I'll be praying for you. Please pray for me. God bless.